Hey everybody, this is Danny Barker. I look forward to working with you in the future. I'm a real estate agent here in San Diego, California. After I did 20 years in the Navy as a nuke, I retired in 2019, got my license, and now for the last couple of years, I've been helping with consultations with veterans to go out and purchase properties with the agents that are in my referral network. And I'll tell you, we keep getting we keep running into the same obstacle here. And I think this is a sign that the market is shifting a little bit. All right. So we all know that the VA loan is zero down is the minimum, right? You can always put a down payment if you want. And if you want to know the benefits to putting down the down payment, you can hit me up. But they're not enough to say, let's wait to buy. Now, rolling on, what problem are we running into right now that we haven't been running into for the last year? The concessions from the seller. So right now, buyers and sellers both are conscious of the market. We think that the interest rates should be lower, but we know that when the interest rates come lower, there's going to be more buyers that come out. When more buyers come out, there's more buyers than there are sellers, and then you'll have a spike in price. But right now, because they're keeping the interest rates up, they're keeping the buyers on the bench. And because those buyers are staying on the bench, sellers that have to sell are lowering their price, right? Now, as these people are lowering their price, I've had a couple of buyers just completely forget that they have closing costs. So you choose zero down. That doesn't mean zero out of pocket. You still have to pay for your inspections during escrow. You're ordering an appraisal. That gets paid at closing costs. But if you cancel the purchase, you might have to pay that back, right? Depending on what the law is, where you're at, and this or that. Either way, my point is you're obligating some money that you weren't really thinking about spending, I guess, right? Real estate's not free. The cost of business isn't free. The government, local and federal, would not allow for us to do business in shifting around the ownership of properties without sticking their sticky little fingers in there and taking little pieces and calling them fees and taxes and services, right? So we've got to know what the offer that we're writing is going to cost us. Not just how much is it going to cost per month because I'm going zero down, right? But let's talk about those closing costs. First of all, the major part of the closing costs are usually the prepaid property tax, insurance, and interest until your first payment. Once we've got those things identified, now those things are going to stay the same with whoever you're doing your loan with. But you need to go to your lender and say, hey, when we factor in property taxes, insurance, interest, and the loan costs, how much am I going to have to come out of pocket with, right? When we're making our offer, we can ask the seller for concessions, but how much do we ask for? I have a client right now in Florida that the sellers dropped their pants. They came down $20,000 in the price. I think 450 to 430. But she didn't ask for closing costs to be paid. You could have gotten $20,000 of concessions because to the seller, they didn't care if it's lowering the price or giving it back to the buyer, right? Their bottom line is the same, whether it's 450 with 20 back, 440 with 10, 445 with 15. Something could have gotten all of the closing costs paid. So before you make your offer, hell, before you go look at a property, you tell your lender, I want to know how much I should expect to come out of pocket to make this purchase. It is not ridiculous to do that. They don't sell you a car and then you drive off the lot knowing your payment, and then they just don't tell you that, oh yeah, they're at that first light is going to be the guy to check your receipt that you paid your closing costs. There's closing costs on a car. Why wouldn't there be closing costs on a house, right? They say tax, title, tag. That's for the car. Tax, title, tag. Doesn't it sound a whole lot like property taxes, insurance, and appraisal, and notary fee, and escrow fee, and title, and tax, transfer tax, right? There's just all kinds of stuff that comes out of the woodwork. Here's my rule of thumb. The VA has set a limit. They say, hey, look, We only want to see 4% concessions from the seller, right? A little trick that we all know, well, in my network, we know that can get you twice that, but you got to work with the right people. And if you want to, you can always make an appointment with me. We'll go over what it is that you're wanting to do, and I'll put you in business with a well-performing realtor right there in your market, right? So in the meantime, let's do this work. Let's just say, okay, I get 4% back from the seller. What is closing costs usually cost, right? You can go to ChatGPT and ask all day, but it's not going to tell you what your lender is going to expect. We can buy the same house 10 times. If we use 10 different lenders, the closing costs would be 10 different numbers. If we bought them on 10 different days, the closing cost will be 10 different numbers with the same lender, right? So we really have to know, and we have to first of all, we have to use a speculative date. Ask them for a figure. Hey, I'm going shopping now. If I close escrow next month, how much should I expect for my closing cost to be? And they'll tell you. And then you know, when I put in my offer, I'm going to ask the seller for that or more. And if you get more than you need, it'll go back to the seller is what all the other realtors will tell you. But if you have a meeting with me, I'll tell you exactly how to use it and exactly why it's allowed. And I'll show you exactly where it is in the guidelines that allows for it to happen. But you have to, in all of these things, you have to exercise this mindset before you put in your offer. Why? Because in your offer is how much am I expected to pay for the property? How much do I want back from the seller? Oh, and this is a fun one. How about the seller that refuses to pay your real estate agent? I'm a real estate agent. So I'll tell you that I'm telling you this, my feelings, my personal feelings on the matter. The buyers always, for the history of the United States, have paid all of the fees in real estate. The sellers strategically and the real estate agents, because by the way, real estate agents started out as a job only representing the sellers. And then decades later, it was identified that if buyers had their own realtor, that they would stop getting taken for a ride so much. So you have a buyer's agent to protect you. They're worth it. Every penny of it, not just a portion. So if you are in business with somebody who asks for 3% for their compensation, that's normal. Now, if you go to make an offer and you're asking the seller, can you please pay my buyer broker 3%? Whose money are they going to use to pay? It's yours. It's your money. It's your money that they use to pay it. They never will have gotten the money. Here, let me help you conceptualize that just real quick, and I'm going to close out this video on this. If I'm paying $300,000 for a house that the seller bought for $100,000 and owes $0, and I'm going to pay $300,000, and the seller is telling and has to tell me that I have to get his permission to use my money for my closing costs, to use my money to pay my representative, right? Because at what point in life did that seller have the $300,000 that he was selling the house for? And I didn't tell him that I would give him $300,000. I'm telling him that I will pay $300,000. Because what does he get? He gets what's left after the real estate agents are paid and after his closing costs. And yes, sellers have closing costs too. Make an appointment and we'll talk about those, and I'll give you a good way to estimate it. So it's always been the buyer's money. They take your $300,000 that you borrowed from the bank, that the bank got insured by the VA, and this $300,000 travels not to the seller. The seller doesn't cut a check to anyone. It travels to title, escrow, lawyer, depending on what state you're in. And the title, the escrow, the lawyer, that person, it's their job to pay the realtor, pay that realtor, pay those fees, pay all these fees, pay the HOA. There's so much that comes up, and so many people that get paid at the end, and they're using your money for it. So do not let a seller bully you around, because you can walk and then he can wait for somebody else to show up at 300,000, or maybe, just maybe, he can get somebody at 290, 285, 280, 275, 270. So do not let these sellers take you for a ride. And my agents, they don't know that every single one of you wants your sellers to pay the closing costs, right? You have to tell them that. The standard is usually we all pay our own closing costs. So being that that's the standard, I want to warn you, and this is the warning, that we've only had this problem for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and it's driving me nuts because it shouldn't be showing up. But we have sellers not willing to pay with your money. It's driving me crazy. So what is that telling me? That tells me that something's in the air. We have a new Fed chair coming in May 15th. I don't know how fast he's going to lower interest rates, but I do know that that's a way that he might go. And if he does, then the sellers are going to get all the power again. And then they're going to be able to say, no, I'm not going to use your money. I'm going to take your money. Why would I pay your things with my money? And now the language gets switched again. But I'll tell you right now, it's not just a language thing. I'm talking about practicality. That seller never had $300,000. He would always only sell it for $280,000. And the other $20,000 is fees and real estate agents. Show up without a real estate agent and ask him if he'll sell it to you for $300,000, and he will gladly, grinning ear to ear, with neither of you being represented, and it will be an absolute show that smells awful because it's a show. I don't want to cuss. All right, guys, I'll catch you on the next one. But please, 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 when you're going to put in an offer, ask everyone involved, how much am I going to pay per month? How much am I going to pay out of pocket? How much are inspections over here? What happens if I get it appraised and have to cancel? Who's paying for that appraisal? Know what the cost of doing business is so that when you're doing the business, you're not surprised by the cost. All right, y'all. Catch you on the next one.